Hi all, this is Sean from Time and Talk. I thought I'd make a video today about my recent excursion to Nice during the half-term holidays. Prices in Europe, because it got me thinking about, watch shopping in Europe when we're abroad, when we're on holiday, when we're anywhere. We're always looking for those watch boutiques and things like that, and whether it's a good idea to buy watches in Europe. And also then it got me thinking about Brexit and the impact that might have on prices. This is not a political video, so it's nothing to do with the politics of Brexit. It's purely about the effect that might have on watch prices and the watch industry. Okay, so this is me just walking down the boulevard in Nice, as you do. And Nice is a great place to watch spot. First time I ever saw Richard Mille on somebody's wrist was in Nice airport, APs, wall to wall Rolexes. It's a great place to watch spot, as I said, and I'm always noticing what people are wearing on their wrist. There's quite a lot of boutiques in Nice. Just to your right is Ferre, which is kind of the official Rolex boutique, if you like, in Nice. Unfortunately, I couldn't film it very much because there was a lot of building work going on outside the Omega boutique here with some speedies and a commemorative statue, I guess, me outside the Omega boutique. There are other boutiques. Hermes, this is where we're at the moment. Swatch, there's a French company called Louis Pion. Tiffany's. To be honest, though, I mean, there wasn't that much of a range. I mean, for the city that's associated with class and high end stuff, I mean, I didn't think there was that much. What I would say is there seems to be more respect for things like Seiko, more choice in the boutiques and things. And if you can get the sort of thing that you can only get in France, then it's a good place to buy it. For example, lip watches. If you've ever seen the Nautic Ski, for example, I would highly recommend that. But aside from that, wasn't that much to write home about in terms of high-end boutiques and things like that. Disregarding the Ferre boutique, which, like I said, was like a building site when I went. So I've just shown you a little bit of footage of my time in Nice. We went through a little bit of the type of boutiques that they have there. But now, in terms of what it's like to buy a watch in Europe and whether it's worth it, particularly obviously for a British person, I'm from the UK. So if I consult my notes, if I'm looking down, it's because I'm consulting my notes. So it seems to me, and you can tell me if you agree with this in the comments, that prices are quite high in Europe. So straight after the EU referendum, apparently, and I've read this on the internet, and I can't bear it out because I obviously can't get them in the shops. But a rainbow Daytona, for example, I'll put a picture up here. You probably know what one is if you're into watches. But after the referendum, the price rose to 120,000. I'm assuming this is on the grey market because it can't be retail price. Before that, it was 60,000. So those are some of the differences that might have been caused by the Brexit referendum. But in terms of some of the watches that I own and that I could personally afford to buy, I have an Omega, first Omega in space, and my first Omega in space was about 3,500 retail. I actually negotiated, just said, can I have 10% off? And they said yes. So I think that worked out about 3,200. In France, the first immigrant space is 4,500 euros. And obviously that's much more expensive, even if you take account of the currency differences. I mean, in the same way, the Explorer, which is £5,000 retail in this country, not that you can get them, is 6,600 euros in Europe. So you're still talking about a significant, more of an outlay if you buy it in Europe. So, I mean, if you're in Europe and you watch shopping and you see an Explorer, chances are you're going to pay a lot more for it on the continent than you are in Britain. And what's interesting, what's interesting to me anyway, is that in some European countries you can get tax-free shopping. So, if you're a Chinese person, you're on holiday in France, you can claim the tax back from the items that you buy in Europe. I'm not an expert in these things, but that's my understanding. So even with the tax reduction that you would get off that Explorer, it still would work out £200 more than in Britain. So you could actually just hop over to Britain and buy it, and still buy it more cheaply than you could in Europe, even with those reductions. And I guess that's one of the issues really with buying a watch in Europe, as in not in the UK, compared to in the UK, particularly for British people. So I actually did a bit of research on it, and to quote an article that I read on a website, it says the UK is one of the least expensive luxury markets in the world. So, if you're a UK consumer, you're actually getting your luxury goods and watches obviously for cheaper than on the continent, which is good for us because it means that we can buy those, Rolexes, Omegas, things like that cheaper. However, on the flip side, we all know there's a bit of a shortage, and this is just not just in the UK, but there's a bit of a shortage of sports models, stainless steel Rolex. That's probably exacerbated by the fact that we cannot actually compete with the prices of other countries. That our price is much lower, so you can hop on a plane from France, from Spain, over to the UK and buy those things and still save money on them. So that's an interesting thing that I never really thought of before, but apparently that's the case. You might have noticed in the clip that I've just shown you of the Omega boutique in Nice, one of the Speedmasters in the window was €5,500. I can only guess that must be a sapphire sandwich or something like that. It can't be an ordinary Speedmaster, because otherwise that would be like €2,000 more than the price that you'd expect it to be. But that's just a brief opinion really on what it's like to buy watches and to shop in Europe. So for me, it's just about window shopping. If you go abroad or anywhere really, you want to look in those watch boutiques, but in terms of getting value for money and buying a watch, you're probably better off as a UK citizen just buying it at home, because you're going to end up spending more money for a watch in Europe. Obviously, and I have dreams about these things. If you see a Daytona, a white dialed Daytona in a jeweler in France, you still buy it even though it's more expensive in the UK, because they're trading at £25,000 on the grey market. But that, I guess that's another issue. So in terms of Brexit, timely video hopefully, because Brexit is supposed to be happening tomorrow, the 31st of October. Obviously it was supposed to happen a while ago, but and the pound might drop in value, and that has happened as a result of the referendum as well. So that's probably had a knock-on effect on kind of some of the prices in the UK, and that's why for someone from Britain, it's more expensive to go to France, to go to Spain, and those prices are more expensive there. But apparently what's happened as a result of the referendum, and then as a result, maybe, because we don't know, of Brexit, is that we might see even further reductions in prices in the UK relative to other European markets. So, as I said before, the UK is apparently the least expensive luxury market in the world. But, even before that, we had cheap prices. And apparently, since the referendum, and maybe carried on after Brexit, there's been a little bit of a boom in the luxury watch industry and in luxury goods in general, because the pound's fallen relative to other currencies. You can come to this country and you can buy a Rolex, you can buy a Zenith, you can buy your Omega for cheaper than you would do in basically any other country in the world, apparently. So you can get like a 20% reduction on some things compared to other markets. So obviously that could mean in the UK, perhaps we're going to find it even more difficult to access some of those sports models, some of the more desirable luxury watches, because people from other countries will be able to buy them from our shops more cheaply and then export them back to their country. And that might explain some of the reasons why it's a 5-year waiting list for this watch, and Daytonas are trading at 25,000 and things like that. I don't think that's the only issue, but it could explain some of it. Another thing is, and I didn't know this until I did some research for this video, apparently jewelers are stockpiling watches because of Brexit, because they maybe think that they're not going to be able to get them after Brexit, so they bring a load in advance to stop those shortages, which is quite interesting because that might stop price rises, because obviously we don't know what's going to happen after the referendum, after we leave the European Union, but also it might look like there's been a rise in sales, and maybe there hasn't been, because apparently quite a large proportion of Swiss watch sales in the world, I think it was just after the referendum, were caused by the fact that in the UK we were buying more, the jewelers were, to stockpile. Obviously, in terms of prices after the Brexit referendum, will there be tariffs? We don't know what's going to happen so far in terms of what the deal with the European Union will be. So will that add a tariff onto your Rolex? Will that add a tariff onto your other luxury watch brands? Will there be things like import duties? So if you buy from a European seller, you find a watch that you like and you want to bring it into the country, will that incur a cost? I mean, so I was reading on a government website which seems to suggest that anything over £400 could be subject to a tariff, the whole amount as well. So if you're buying a watch for 20,000, for 10,000, that could be a significant amount of money. But again, I'm just speculating because we don't really know what will happen yet. So I just thought that was quite an interesting kind of part of watch collecting and looking for watches. What's it like to buy watches in Europe, which after all is the home of these watches a lot of the time. Switzerland, though it's not in the European Union, that's where we're going to be buying a lot of these watches from. And also the Brexit thing in terms of how it will affect prices. When I go on holiday, particularly to France, I think it's good to look to window shop and things like that, but I think you'd be pretty insane to actually buy a watch in France, in Spain, when you can get it so much cheaper in the UK. And I didn't really realise, to be honest, that the UK was, to quote, the cheapest luxury market in the world. I think in terms of a summary of what might happen after Brexit and in terms of buying watches in Europe, if you see certain models in the window of a Spanish jeweler, of a French jeweler, you still should buy it, because despite the price differences between the two countries, you're still going to be getting a saving because of the sheer ridiculousness of some prices of Rolex models. But obviously we're not just talking Rolex here. In terms of Brexit and the pound and UK buyers, perhaps now is the best time to buy, because we do not know what's going to happen as a result of tariffs and things like that on luxury goods, on luxury watches after we leave the European Union. And finally, who knows? We literally do not know what's going to happen with some of this. It's pure speculation, and it'd be quite interesting to see what happens, especially in the light of the UK having those cheaper prices in other places in the world, and whether Rolex or other brands might want to increase prices to keep it competitive in that way, I guess. So tell me what you think in the comments. I mean, do you buy a lot of your watches from Europe? Is there a way you can get a deal? Maybe I'm being naive and you can get cheaper prices in Europe or in some countries maybe. Tell me what you think of what's going to happen after Brexit in terms of watch prices. If you have some inside information that I don't have, that'd be awesome to find out. If you like my videos, please subscribe. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.